What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Creativ Rise podcast. I am so glad you are here. My name is Joey. If you are new here, welcome to the show. So glad you are here. Creativ Rise exists to help you break the creative struggle. We just believe in building a world where more creatives get to succeed while doing what they love. And that is the story of today's guest. Victor Aerdan is a friend of mine. He is a photographer and filmmaker who hails from Belgium, but he's been living in Canada for the last long while. He's one of my favorite creatives I know. He is so darn good at what he does, and he is amazing on the creative side, and he's also grown so much on the business side and built a beautiful business. So that's what this podcast is about helping you succeed at doing what you love, and typically that comes down to talking about the business side of things. And so that's what we're going to talk about today with Victor, uncover some of the tips and tricks and strategies that Victor has been using to grow his business over the last couple of years, and he's done a phenomenal job of it. Victor and I first met in the first round of the Creativ Rise Mastermind. We kind of connected online on Instagram before that, but the first round of our 6-week signature Creativ Rise Mastermind was back in 2019, summer of 2019. That's where I first really got to know Victor. As he came in, he was working another job. As he left the mastermind, he had quit that job or left that job and gone full-time as a creative. And the story of what has happened to his career and his life since then is quite magnificent. That's a hard word to say sometimes, but it is magnificent. So I'm so glad that you are here to tune on into Victor's episode of the podcast. It is going to be such a good one, so I cannot wait for you to tune on into it. So here is the episode with Victor. Victor Aerdan, my friend, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being on, brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Joey.
It's been
How's it going?
I feel like this has been a long time coming to get you on the podcast. I don't know why you haven't been on the podcast 3 or 4 times already, based on just your story, everything that's happened. And you've been around Creativ Rise since the very beginning. You were actually in round 1 of the Creativ Rise Mastermind back in August of 2019, which is crazy. That feels like forever ago.
That's right. 4 years ago.
That's
pretty much
almost 4 years ago. That's crazy. So cool.
Yeah,
okay.
Next month it'll be 4 years.
Victor, you've listened to the show. You know how this goes. We're going to jump right on into rapid fire right off the bat. Let the listeners get to know you a little bit before we dive on into the rest of the episode. So real quick, where are you from?
Originally from Belgium, living in Alberta, Canada right now.
Cool. And where in Belgium were you originally from?
The north, close to Antwerp, really close to the Dutch border.
Super cool. Okay. And then what is your business? If you met somebody in an elevator and they said, hey, what do you do? How do you describe it? I know as creatives, we often struggle sometimes to describe it, but what do you do very simply?
Oh, yeah, I create photos and videos for brands. That's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Yeah, totally. And then how long have you been in that business for?
Probably been shooting for 5 years, with only 4 years full-time almost now. It will be 4 years in September full-time.
Yeah, which is so epic. Like right after the Creativ Rise Mastermind is when you made the jump. I remember that.
Yeah.
And
it was pretty much like happening in the middle of the Creativ Rise Mastermind.
Yeah, that was so funny.
A trip to the Yukon that came up, and I was out of my contract with my physio job back in Vancouver, so it's like, it's now our contract's up anyway. There's this cool opportunity to go to the Yukon. So it kind of jumped.
Yeah, okay. I want to dive into that. But before we dive into that, last rapid fire question. What is a flop you've had? Okay, like let's humanize Victor for a second. What's a flop you've had in your business?
I have been lucky not to have too many like crazy flops yet before. There's one actually in that same trip in the Yukon that I accidentally basically formatted a memory card that I didn't have a backup off, but I managed to get that back, so the flop wasn't that big. And then last year, I like a grizzly viewing tour. It was like 19 grizzlies fishing salmon in a river, and took a bunch of photos, a bunch of videos. Managed to have the photos, but I don't know what happened to the videos. I have not a single one. They're all gone. I don't know where they went, but it was awesome. There's like grizzlies like 5 meters in front of us fishing for salmon. It was insane.
Crazy.
Video's gone.
Was that for a job?
It was, yeah. Luckily, I still had all the photos, and it wasn't like, it was more for a social gig, so like I had to post about it, which, you know, videos would have been great for reels and that kind of stuff, but I still had the photos to post, and there was other things as well, not just the grizzlies.
Gotcha.
That's probably the biggest one, honestly.
Gotcha. Okay, so you lost the video of like a crazy National Geographic moment. That's so funny. Alrighty. Okay, so Victor, there are so many different ways this conversation could go, because over the last 4 years, when I first met you, you had a dream to be doing what you love full time, And fast forward now,
Yeah.
you've been full-time for the last 4 years, and you've had some awesome success in the last 2 years, some record-breaking numbers in your business. It's been so cool to watch. And I always tell people all the time, I'm like, I think Victor's truly the best photographer I know. Like the way you shoot and the way you understand color is just insane, lighting and everything. So I love what you've done with your business. It's been so cool to watch. But let's go all the way back to the beginning. You just touched on it. So you were working a physio job. Why don't you start there? Give me the story of how you got into running your own creative business.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it starts like everyone. You get like curious about photos and want to pick up your own camera. For me, it started when I moved to Canada, and I want to show my friends back home like how cool it is here. Like I was living in the mountains at the time, working at a hotel, and it was like beautiful all around me. And cell phones back then weren't all that great. I didn't have a great iPhone camera or anything like that. So I'm like, I'm gonna buy a camera to like properly show people what it looks like here. And that's kind of how the bug got planted, right? Because you start shooting, it's a rabbit hole. You just keep going further down, and eventually, there's like some small things that popped up that I was making money at. Like, I feel like a lot of people start with this. I got sent a watch from some company, and I take photos for a watch for like $200 or something. Like that. I feel like that's everyone's beginning story. Is like some watch company reached out to me, get me a watch.
What brand was it?
Some Swiss brand, like Flaxman watches or something like that. Some Swiss brand.
That's so funny. I only ask because I had that exact same thing super early on in my career as well. It was like the same thing, like a $200 or $500 gig. It was for Brattleboro, I believe. I think they sent me 2 watches and sent the photos, got paid, never heard from them again. I don't even know if they exist anymore, but everyone has that watch brand that we start with. So, okay, keep going. So you shoot the watch brand, keep it going.
Yeah, and then there's like sort of like on and off things. So, but I was obviously still working other jobs. In the beginning, when I was in Canada, I couldn't be a fit. So I'm trained as a physiotherapist. So I was just working odd jobs at hotels and stuff like that. Then when I finally was a physio, I moved to Vancouver for a job there. Every weekend when I was not working the week, we were going out camping, like going to the mountains, hiking, like shooting things, and just posting on Instagram a lot. Through that, some like little things started coming up, like little jobs or free products, or like the way it goes for most people, I assume, that post stuff on Instagram. So usually it wasn't paid. Actually, my first probably like consistent paid gig when I lived in Vancouver was like I shot for DoorDash and skipped the dishes. It was like something like $100 per restaurant, but like you used to be able to, for DoorDash, just go like hit up 5 restaurants in a row, bring all the food home, and then just shoot it all under the same studio setup. So just kind of batch those out when I had a free afternoon or something like that. And that was kind of the start to it. Yeah.
Crazy. Okay, so how did you get that gig? Walk me through that. Because was that before we met or was that after we met?
That was before you met. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so walk me through, how did you end up getting that gig with DoorDash?
If I remember correctly, it was through one of those like agency sites.
Oh, yeah.
It's like there's #date these days and stuff like that. But I think it's Snapwire or something it was called. Essentially, like they would list jobs on there, and then it was super localized for that one because obviously it's restaurants around you, so it was all localized for Vancouver in this case. So they were always looking for like people to go shoot certain restaurants, and then you could like apply for them and then get that gig, and then you just batch out a bunch. Yeah. So
okay.
That was the very first like consistent gig because I probably did like 50 restaurants at the very least, more probably.
Wow.
Probably close to 100, honestly.
That's crazy. That's a lot. That's a lot of restaurants.
I know.
That's crazy.
I would never do it again.
You are a master food photographer, I'm sure, after that. That's so cool. And was it just in like a home little studio setup you built?
I literally put like, a camera up top, 2 soft boxes on both sides because no shadows were allowed. So no directional light, just pure flat out, top down shot of food, and then a 45 angle of the same setup. That's it.
Crazy.
That's what they wanted. Every dish, 2 photos, on to the next.
Wow. Did you get to eat the food?
Yeah, I could eat it, but like, there's only so much food you could eat.
Yeah, totally.
Some of it was questionable for sure.
Okay, some of it wasn't your style. I like it. Okay, cool. So early days, DoorDash brand, like watch companies. Let's talk about some of the brands you're working with now. I'm just going to rhyme off a few, and then I want you to tell me what have been some of your favorite projects. So Heineken, Westjet, Fairmont, Toyota, Columbia, Travel Yukon, Hastings, Dewar, Woods Canada, Travel Alberta, Overland Yukon, whatever that phone is, that Hawaii? What's that called?
Huawei.
Why did I say
Yeah,
Hawaii,
yeah.
bro? That's nowhere close.
Hawaii.
Huawei,
Yeah.
Cochrane's Tourism Board, From Barrel to Bottle, Eau Claire, Southern Idaho Tourism, Kicking Horse Mountain Resort, Life Straw, and I'm sure there's more because you probably haven't
Yeah.
updated the client list on your website.
I
Victor,
haven't updated my website in a
that
little
is
while. Yeah, that's for
that
sure.
is a lot of big brands. And
Yeah.
again, I'm going to ask you in a second what your favorite one was, but how does it feel to work with so many like heavy hitters? Like that's a lot of big brands. And that's what I'm sure Victor, 4.5, 5 years ago, even around the time when we met, that was your dream, was to work with a lot of those brands. I remember the first brand that you had landed, I think, based off you coming out of the mastermind, was the Woods Canada one. I remember us working on that pitch together, and we
Yeah,
were
yeah.
going back and forth
Yeah.
in the DMs with them. And I was like, we were helping each other like craft the messages you were sending back and forth. But like since then, you've developed a great relationship with them and a great relationship with so many of these other companies. Like, talk to me about what it feels like to go from wanting to work with brands to looking at that list and going like, whoa, like that's a lot.
Yeah, no, it's awesome looking back for sure. And like obviously it goes gradual, so along the way you maybe don't always realize, but there's always like these wins and like obviously that's cool. And looking back it's insane. But like I would say there's still a lot of room to grow in even those things, because a lot of those projects are like things like, oh, it's either a social gig or like there's like one or two commercial shoots. But
Yep.
like obviously like part of me is like I'm never really like sort of satisfied with
Yep.
that. I always want to
Totally.
get to the next level of that. So like let's say we're talking like a Woods Canada or like a Columbia or something, I would love to actually shoot like a commercial full campaign for them, that kind of thing. That's happened a little bit in the past for brands, but like dude, I always kind of want to take it further.
Yeah, of
which is
course. And that,
interesting. So I'm like, looking back for me is hard. I'm like, I mostly just look at the things like, oh, I wish this one could still be better, or like
yeah,
we could do something cool here. But definitely it's awesome. It's been pretty crazy to growth in like the last just 4 years.
yeah.
And to come back to your question, what are some of my favorite projects of those? I'm going to say Hastings and Yukon Overland and Travel Yukon, because those were pretty much the two very first ones after DoorDash that kind of had like a proof of concept. So Hastings Overland was his overland company. They don't exist anymore because the pandemic wasn't very, very kind on them. But it was this company that rented Jeeps with rooftop tents out of Vancouver. And they invited me randomly just from seeing my Instagram work on a trip to Vancouver Island, just to take a Jeep out for them to rooftop tent, go to Vancouver Island for a week and just shoot the Jeep all around it, which was super cool. That was while I still was working as a physio, pretty much right after I was doing all the DoorDash stuff, or at the same time. And then from that one, that kind of got me like dreaming, like, oh, this is super cool. Like someone's paying me to go on this trip to Vancouver Island just to do what I like to do on the weekend anyway. This is awesome. Like I can shoot photos, I can shoot this brand. It's super cool. And then a couple of months go by, and that ended actually sort of reaffirming that whole thing, because Andrew, who I think you
Yeah,
know as well,
totally.
Andrew Batee from Overland Yukon,
Legend.
he reached out having seen the Hastings Overland work, and he runs a similar company
Yeah.
up in the Yukon. So
His company's phenomenal. It's a great company.
yeah, it's awesome, man. And so he saw what I shot there, and then invited me up to the Yukon for another trip. So I went up to the Yukon for 2 weeks shooting with Travel Yukon and Overland Yukon, and as well Woods Canada, which we kind of landed together on the Creativ Rise Mastermind that
Yeah.
time.
Such an epic trip, man. I remember seeing everything from that trip, and that was like, I feel like that trip was very momentous for you. Like it was
Yes.
it was a launch pad for you for the career you're currently living in right now. So cool.
Yeah, and it was very much like a proof of concept almost too, because like I did this one thing with Hastings, and all of a sudden another thing came in just from that, like through like they kind of know each other, the people that run Hastings Overland and Andrew. It's like sort of word of mouth and sort of just seeing like the work that I did there and liking it. So it's like kind of proof of concept, like, okay, this is actually possible. Like there is actually something here. This might be a career opportunity. And then the big thing for me then was to the mastermind. And I think like one of the first sessions that we did was pretty much all about mindset. I don't know if it's still the same these days.
Yeah.
But that was sort of a real focus shift for me too, where it's like, okay, that combined with those two trips, I'm like, this is actually possible. Because before I was like, yeah, everyone wants to be a photographer. There's so many people shooting photos. It's probably so saturated already. Like there's no way you can make money doing this and earn a living. But you know, all those things are kind of proof of concept for me. So that's when I made the jump too. So right
cool.
after, well, the Yukon trip was the jump really.
Yeah, so cool. Okay, talk to me about the mastermind and the mindset stuff, because I think that's really interesting. So talk to me about what was your mindset before coming into the mastermind on you potentially running a creative business? And then talk to me about like going through the mastermind. How did that mindset shift for you? And how has that enabled you to build a career doing what you love and getting paid really well to do it?
Um, yeah. So obviously, it's like the reason for going into the mastermind for everyone is probably different. For me, it was like I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know nothing about like how do I talk to these brands? How do I properly reach out? Because I think everyone in the beginning, I mean, Noah's I at least starts by just sending random messages on like Instagram or
Yeah.
like trying to find an email, being like, "Hey, I would love the proposal by you. Can you send me an email for your marketing contact?" Then you send an email, "Hey, I'd love to work together. Here's how it work. Cheers. Let me know if you have work."
Yeah. Let me know. I'll just
So
be hanging
it
out here.
starts like that. So you're like, "Yeah, let me know," but no rush, no pressure. Um, so obviously, like that wasn't really leading to any success, and any success that or any little jobs that I was actually getting were more through like people seeing my stuff or something like that. So that work kind of speaking for itself, and that led me to believe in the beginning, like, oh, it's just like you got to get really good at what you're doing, got to be a really good photographer, videographer, and then the brands will just come and pay you. And it's happened sometimes, but that's definitely doesn't fill out your year and then make that a full career, right?
Yeah.
So there's outreach needed, there's a framework needed, and I just didn't know how that worked. So that was a big reason for joining the mastermind and kind of get that framework and more of a strategy behind it all. And unexpectedly, that first session about mindset was probably the biggest switch for me, just like actually showcasing that it's possible. And then obviously hearing your story with your business as well, and then other people that were in there too. So
Yeah. So cool. And this is full circle. This is a full circle moment for me, at least, Victor, because you're sitting right here on the Creative Rise podcast going, that first session on mindset where I learned it was possible was a big shift for me.
yeah,
And now you're on the podcast talking about how you went from a physio guy, made the jump, which is an incredible, amount of courage to make the jump out of a profession like physio over into wanting to run your own creative business. And you've now totally succeeded at it. You've had a couple great years. The last 2 years have been phenomenal. And you are now giving that mindset shift to everybody on the podcast that it is possible as well, which is so cool.
yeah,
So what a full circle moment. That's a beautiful thing. So, okay, why don't we jump into that? Let's talk about brands. So I just listed off a massive amount of brands that you've worked with that are massive heavy hitter brands. And so many people that listen to the show are going to be going the same way you would have been saying this 5 years ago, Victor, when we met. Like, I just want to be working with those big brands where they can pay you, they've got bigger budgets, and it's going to give me a career out of this thing rather than just like a little side hustle, side hobby hustle. Talk to me about like, what is your process now when it comes to working with a brand? And just debunk that a little bit. Talk to me about how you typically get in touch with brands. What's the typical thing you're selling them on? Like, are you selling them on specific types of photo packages? Are you selling them on like social stuff, video stuff, like commercial stuff, billboard? Like, talk to me about everything from the perspective of what does it look like in the world of Victor to work with a brand, and then if you can mesh a tip or two in there for everybody listening that want to do the same thing.
yeah. Yeah, before I get into sort of a disclaimer, not a disclaimer, but I believe too that I truly wouldn't be as successful as I am right now without like certain people in my network around me. Like I've mentioned
100%.
to you before the call, I think From Barrel to Bottle, this company my friend Eric started. It's a whiskey company, a video and photo production company. So that's where I do a lot of work for. And obviously there was like in the beginning, the relationships with like Rome Creative and Mark and
Yeah,
Jay
totally.
and Braden. And that helped me out at that time too. But throughout it all, there's always like been my own projects and stuff too. But I've always also found a lot of success in like sort of, my network and leaning on friends and relationships and that kind of stuff, maybe a little more than most people. Or because like I said before the call to you too, like these days I do very little outreach. Like it's either it comes in through one of those side channels or it comes straight to my mailbox through like other relationships or referrals or things like that. So it's these days it's kind of hard to say what a typical project looks like. But yeah, outreach is very little these days. So usually it's the brand coming to us or me doing it through one of those other channels with friends or relationships.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, if a brand comes to me, it's pretty much we kind of figure out what their goal is. What's their goal for this campaign? What do we want to achieve? What does that look like ideally? So where do you want to get to? And then kind of work it down from there, really, right? So start with that, see try and see what budget there is available. But that's, the whole back and forth thing. A lot of the times, what's your budget? What's your rate? What's your budget?
Yeah.
I think that's also a very familiar thing for most people, but if you can figure that out and kind of be talking about it in a transparent way, like just flat out say it almost. Something that my friend Eric taught me too is like just flat out go into the email and say like, we can go back and forth about budgets and like chat about it for multiple emails, or we can just like, be transparent and come out in the open and say like, okay, this is what we have available. That's what we want to achieve. And then I find that it works really well if you talk about it transparently like that.
Yeah.
Because then everyone's just on the same level right away. And
yeah,
rather than like, what's your budget? No, what's your rate? Like that doesn't feel good for anyone.
Totally.
So it's like just cards on the table and be transparent about it is what I found is the nicest thing. But
yeah.
I don't know. So I
That's
think
great.
I just totally went somewhere else.
No, that's great. No, it's great. I love how you went into two different things. The first thing you went into was that you owe a lot of your success to your network, which is all of us, right? That's me, absolutely. I just actually this morning connected a couple of Creativ Rise Mastermind grads that have gone through that are filmmakers in Ontario in Canada with an old client of mine, because I still get calls in that region of the world from clients saying, hey, we need this. And
Crazy.
they're great clients to do work for. I'm like, sweet, I'm passing people jobs, right? Which is what I've experienced that myself. I know you just mentioned you've experienced that. And so one of the third week of the Creativ Rise Mastermind is called Your Network is Your Net Worth. We talk about that. I know you know that. You've been through that. And it's so true. So why don't we go into that for just 1 second? Like, and this is probably a funny question, because it's like, okay, how do you build these friendships, right? And you don't want to build them from the perspective of like, oh, I'm building this friendship in order to get something out of them, like get work out of them. The best work relationships that, really give you a ton of work are actually the relationships that are more just like a friend to friend level, and you're not actually trying to get things from people. But for people who are going, you know what, Victor, I don't actually have a lot of people that I'm surrounded by or I'm connected to that I feel like I could give a gig to, or they could give a gig to me. How do you think you start out in building those relationships that are eventually going to help your career grow?
I mean, paradoxically, I think your goal just needs to be completely different than just building the relationships. You just need to be out there and being a good person. And like, obviously, everyone wants to be surrounded by like-minded people and have like friends around them that like doing the same things, that like are interested in some of the same things you have. And I think, and I know you wanted to touch on social media there as well. I think early days Instagram, and still these days, it was actually super valuable for that for me, because it's very easy to be in a region like Alberta or something, and then you see other people around you that are doing the same thing. So they're shooting, they're photographers, they're making videos, and I don't know, it all went pretty organically for me. Like you just start chatting there or wherever you meet each other, and then eventually go, let's meet up, let's go shoot together. And that's how most of them started, really. And I think rather than going in it with a goal of like, I need to build these relationships to further my career, I think you just need to be a good person and just, focus on that more than really focusing on, I need this for my career.
Yeah,
so
totally.
If the goal of the relationship is just to build a relationship, it's probably not a great relationship.
100%. Yeah. Well, you could even enter in, I think, to add to that, entering into that relationship going, rather than what can I get from this? Just, hey, how can I be an asset? How can I give? How can I give to friends? How can I give, and make the people around you in your town and your city better? And then the second thing, what I hear you saying, and I think this is so true, we scream this in the mastermind. This is why Creativ Rise exists, is isolation kills. Like if you're isolated, if you don't have people you can go out and shoot with and build relationships with and feel supported with, be encouraged by, don't expect your business to grow. Like it's just that simple, right? I know you've experienced the fruit of being surrounded by awesome people, and it is so helpful. So, okay, let's jump into some of the pricing stuff with brands, because I know you said one of your favorite ways is just to kind of get straight to the point, be very transparent about it, and you don't like the back and forth where it's kind of awkward, like what's your rate, what's the budget, and that is I totally get that. That's a very weird thing to try and communicate. It's like everyone gets excited about the project and you try and figure out what's going to cost, and it's a weird conversation. So other than just like figuring it out and being very transparent in an email, when you say, hey, here's my price, how do you even get there? Like, how do you determine what you think you want from a brand in terms of a budget in order to make a project happen? Because that's what catches so many creatives, on the front end of being confused. I know that was me earlier in my career. I know that was you. We all get confused with that, right? Like, what do I charge? So how does Victor break down like your pricing? Like how do you decide what you're going to charge for something?
Yeah, probably another question where I'm just terrible at answering it because like I feel like I'm doing things like not by the book or like most people do. I feel maybe I'm, I don't know, but I feel like a lot of that is like so also through relationships and community around you. And that's one of the things I really love about people here in Alberta and the people that we're surrounded by is there's a really like sort of a tight community and everyone's pretty transparent with each other.
Yeah.
So that means that we all sort of know what we're charging for things, or like if I know that someone else has worked with this brand before that has approached me, I'll likely ask them a question if I know them well enough and be like, what's the budget like? Like how was that budget? And so like by everyone sharing openly like that, it kind of benefits all of us, I think, because you have a better idea of like, okay, where do my rates sit? Okay, I'm really charging too little for this stuff, or I'm really in a good range or stuff like that. So I think that's a big one. Other than that, it's there hasn't been a single project almost that has, or other than for the same client, that has had the same pricing structure or like the same price for something. It depends so much on their budget, and I feel like this is pretty much a non-answer, but that's where I like
Great.
to start. And then I obviously there's like minimums that you don't want to do something for, but then there's always also the consideration like, okay, maybe this is a first off with a certain agency or brand, and you're like, maybe I do give in a little bit, but also take something away at the same time. So I don't give them the full package, or I don't give them my full thing, but I could do a little bit just as kind of a test.
Yeah, scale
to
down
then
the
maybe
deliverables.
to then build our future relationships. So it's like maybe sometimes it's worth investing a little bit more than you're getting out of it, just because maybe you can grow this into something nice. And if you're good and easy to work with, and the people at the agency like you, and they usually, from my experience, are super appreciative if you're willing to like lower your rates or like do them a favor that way. And for me, it's happened a lot of times that agency people like that come back for future jobs, and the budgets definitely can increase that way too, because the key is letting them know that you did it for cheaper than you normally would, or that you did them a favor or something, not in a way like, oh, you owe me, but like in a way like, no, I'm definitely willing to lower this for this case for you, because like I value the future potential and I would love to build a long-standing relationship with you guys, something like that. And that's benefited me for sure there. And so to answer the question, how does the pricing structure usually look like? It's different every time, and I'm probably the worst person to answer.
No. That's a great answer, because that's my answer as well. Every client has got a different problem. That's a different capacity, right? And so every quote is different because you're getting paid to solve a different problem, right? So if you would have answered that, and we both know this, but when creatives answer that, oh, well, like my day rate is this and it's the same for every project, that's just not a great way to price things, because some things are just simply more expensive than other things because of the problem you're solving, which is cool. Okay, so I love that. I'm just going to throw this question in real quick. What's the most expensive job you've ever gotten hired to do? You don't have to tell. We don't have to drop the brand name or anything like that or what it was, but what was the most expensive job that you got hired to do?
It's not even like compared to some people that high. It's like 20 or 25K, I would say. Yeah. So, or my part of it at least.
Yeah.
You know?
So your
the
part
job
of
itself might have been like 50 or 60 total budget or more, but my part of it was maybe not. Yeah.
20, 25K. That's incredible. And the reason why I asked that is I'm like, again, 4.5 years ago ish, you were asking the question, is it possible? And now you're here on this podcast talking about how you made probably a massive chunk. That 25K on one project was probably a massive chunk of what you were making, or a decent chunk of what you would have been making prior to starting your own creative business, which is incredible. So,
100%. Yeah.
Okay, that's so cool. I love talking about that. Victor, you've mentioned social media earlier on in the podcast and how social media has played a pivotal role in helping you gain connections, get exposure for who you are and the problems you solve, and really showcase, I think, and develop your own style. I think that's one of the things you're the most known for, at least in my eyes, is you have a very unique style, and I think that's what attracts a lot of brands to you. Talk to me about social media. Talk to me about how you've grown your social. Talk to me about how you've grown your social to start, and we'll talk about a couple other things about it after that.
Yeah. No, I feel like, especially these days, it gets such a bad rep, social media. And I know, like, I think you've chatted to Dustin about this, to a good friend of mine, and he pretty much thinks the same way. It's like everyone's always blaming Instagram or the algorithm or some external factor on the reason why they're not having success. And I think just like anything else, is just a tool, and you shouldn't attach your self-worth to it. You shouldn't expect anything from it, because in reality, you're not paying for the service.
Mm-hmm.
They don't owe you anything, really.
Yeah.
They're just there for you to use, and it's a tool, so it depends on how you use it. And yeah, I'd be lying if I didn't say like Instagram and social media played a pretty big role in like me becoming a photographer, obviously, because that's kind of where my work first got out there, and that's kind of how I got my couple first clients or got exposure to that world. So it's like, for me, it was pivotal. It's even where I built most of my network and my relationships through with like-minded people, because where else would you meet them, really, right? So for that, I think it's been an amazing tool. Really, really good. Obviously, growing your social in there, it might have been a little bit easier back in the day, but it's still very much possible, as Dustin has shown.
Yeah, he's blown up.
I've grown more in the last year than I did in all the previous years.
So it's probably actually a better time to grow now than it was 5 years ago, which we all don't think.
Actually, probably.
But the reality is, when you look at the data and you look at the numbers, like, you know, you and Dusty, like, you guys have definitely grown. Dusty for sure has grown way more in the last year than he has ever, right? So, okay, so talk to me about this a little bit, because I know you connected with me when I posted that thread the other day. And I was talking about how Instagram has given me so much. Like, we all dog on it, as you were just saying. But for the people that really commit, and I don't just mean like committing for 6 months. I mean like they go, this is what I'm committing to. I'm building it into my schedule. I'm putting a lot of myself into this. Most people I know that have done that have seen some type of payoff that they are grateful for. And you would be one of those people. So talk to me about what that commitment has looked like for you over the years that has allowed you to grow and has allowed brands to, you know, see you because you've gotten a lot of exposure. Like, what was Victor's growth plan, if you could summarize it, or what is the growth plan still for you on how you develop content and put out content in a way that is helping you build your business from a social media perspective?
Yeah. Again, I'm not probably doing 100% right. Like these days, if you want to do it 100% right, you should be showing up. You should be showing your face on stories, chatting on your stories, and showing up a lot more than I'm currently doing. And I've never really done that. My strategy's been from the beginning, like, I want to take photos as possibly good as I can and share those with the world. And that kind of worked for me. Like, somehow people sort of connected to my photos, and like that sort of grew following that way without me ever really showing much personality on my own page. I've maybe started to put that in there a little bit more, just because I think it's the reality of it right now, and using it as a tool for your business is that your personality needs to be at least a little bit in it. But back in the day, it was enough to just share really good work, and people would connect with that sometimes to share value or inspiration that way. And I recently, obviously, it's been reels are very, very important. And then I think also more showing up as a person on there, which I'm very bad at, and I could definitely be a lot better at, but that seems to be working for a lot of other people like Dustin. And I think so.
Totally. Just heavy commitment, trying to do the best thing you can do. You're active in the right
places.
Put it out
there, right?
You're just connecting with people.
The main thing with everything is like, just like Instagram, where I was saying, like, people blame it as an external factor, but it's like, the moment you stop blaming external factors and just start and do the thing, like, that's when it's gonna over time grow. And if you're just waiting until some external circumstance is like aligned with what you want to do, then it's never gonna happen, because like, you're always gonna get busy, or something's always gonna happen, or your newest photo maybe didn't get the engagement you want, and you just stop doing it. Like, it doesn't work like that. You just need to stick in and do it, and stop blaming external things. Like I said, it's just a tool. Depends on you how you use it, right?
Yeah, totally. Well, and it's a tool to be, if you want to play the game, it's a tool to be understood and used how the tool is supposed to be used, because the tool is going to change every couple months. You know, the tool is constantly changing. Social media is constantly changing. So how you use it for business, if you want to continue to have it be a leverageable space for you, for your business, you've got to see it as a tool that's going to change. You got to adapt as it changes, right? Which is so interesting and so cool.
Yeah, no, definitely. And then just to add on to that, like, I think it's also just important to show a certain range on there every now and then. So sometimes more important that I find is, other than, you know, sharing that perfect photo of, let's say, Moraine Lake and getting like super good engagement with that, I think sometimes it's really important to just share your actual work, like some work that you're proud of. Maybe it's a commercial project you shot for a client, or like, if you're not doing commercial projects yet, that could be a spec project and stuff like that. So because you never know who's watching, like, maybe that post gets like a third of the engagement of your Moraine Lake photo, but maybe one person from an agency sees it and it's like, oh, that's exactly what we need.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of potential there. It's not always just about the engagement on there.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you want to grow it, it might be, but
totally,
it's also a great showcase and portfolio showcase for your work is, and in today's world, that's probably where a brand will first see your photos is on Instagram or
100%.
on
Yeah.
social.
Right. They're going to search you first before they email you or reach out, whatever
Yeah,
it's going to be. Absolutely. And we've had that conversation before. I remember having that conversation with you in the mastermind because your work is insane. And I remember the conversation of us going, how do we fit more product, like more product placement into your work? Because you're exactly right. That is where
yeah,
that might not get as much engagement or shares, or back in the day it was like shares on stories, that just like blew up people's accounts because everyone would be like reposting
yeah, yeah,
your post on their story. But it might not get that. But what it's going to do is, you're exactly right, that brand manager might see it and go, wow, I could really see how Victor could shoot our products incredibly well. And you've done an incredible job of doing that. I remember you took that right away and ran with it. And yeah, your product, your photos ever since have just, there's been a lot of that in there, and you do probably one of the better
yeah.
jobs I see on the entire platform of product placement while still making images just look incredible and dreamy, and people want to be, engaging with them, which is so cool. Okay.
Yeah, true.
So talk to me about, we'll wrap up with some of this. Talk to me about your experience in the mastermind. And I know you talked about the mindset shift. You talked about learning how to kind of say the right words and pitch properly. And I know you mentioned this earlier. I was going to talk about it, but we just got caught up in so many other things. But you said that you don't even pitch anymore. And I think this is hilarious because everyone gets to this point eventually when you commit hard enough and you start to grow your business. I say this all the time to people in the mastermind. I think I've said this on the podcast before. I think you and I probably had a conversation about this years ago, but you'll wake up one day and go, oh my goodness, I haven't pitched in like 6 months, yet I'm still growing my business. I'm still getting inquiries for stuff. Brands are still reaching out. And the reality is because you've put in your time networking, you've put in your time outreaching, and pitching earlier on in your career, and you've built a foundation of contacts and a foundation of a body of work and a presence online that allows you to actually not have to spend all of your time reaching out to brands anymore, because they're often quite often reaching out to you. I know you said that before you were in the mastermind, that wasn't necessarily the case.
Yep.
So what did you learn about pitching in the mastermind that helped you create the foundation that you're now experiencing, living in now, where you're having a lot of brands reach out to you and wanting to work with you?
100%. I mean, I do, just to clarify, I do pitch when I want to now, but I don't feel like I have to.
Yes, exactly.
It's more like to get certain jobs I want, or like clients I really want to work with, I'll try and pitch that kind of stuff. But it's not like, oh no, I got to put 100 emails out this month because I don't have any work yet next month, that kind of thing. It's more like when I need to and when I want to, I'll pitch, but I don't have to necessarily at this point, which is awesome, obviously. And that's true, like the relationships built and all that kind of stuff as well. So what I've learned in the mastermind though for that is like, and this is very similar for everyone that reaches out in the beginning. It's probably like, hey, we should work together. These are my photos. Check them out. Like, I think we could work together. Done. And you make it all about yourself, right? It's like, oh, I'm Victor, this and that. I grew up here. I love adventuring. And you make it like fully about yourself. Yes. And that was the biggest thing for me in the mastermind. And it makes total sense because in the end, you're selling a solution to a problem. So like, you need to make it about them. They don't care about you at all. They all only want to know, like, how can this person benefit me or solve my problem? Like, I don't care what his 2 dogs are called, or that his grandma is an avid hiker at 80 years old. Like, I don't care. So they just want to know, how can this person help me? So that's like the shift. It's like, okay, stop talking about yourself. Just make it about them and like let them know what you can do for them. And then that was the biggest shift for sure.
Yeah, totally.
How to actually bring value and put that across.
Totally, yeah. And I mean, that's one of the hardest things for a lot of people earlier on in their career to figure out is we pitch ourselves because we don't know how to pitch our value early on, right? And I'm sure you've experienced that. I know when I first started my career, I didn't know what my value was. So every time I reached out to a company, all I had to say was, this is who I am, and this is what I do. I like your brand. We should work together. But as you start to develop, I get problem solving now. I get how I'm a creative problem solver. I get that I'm providing, as you just said, a solution to a brand's problem. You can really start to highlight some of that stuff and become an asset when you're reaching out and making it not about you, but about the brand, which is so cool. So that's such a great answer. Okay. What advice do you?
Incredibly simple.
Go ahead.
Sorry. The problem can be incredibly simple, right? Yep. Sometimes it's just like, we got this product that we don't have photos of. They need photos. Solution to the problem done.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. We often overthink it, right? We think it's like it's got to be something crazy complex. And you're right. It could be a very external problem of we just don't have images of
Yep.
this. And because we don't have images, we're not going to sell as much product as we want. We need more images if we want to sell more product, which is so cool.
Yep.
So
Totally.
talk to me about somebody who's maybe newer in their career, or maybe somebody who's been around for a couple years, but their income is not where they want to be. They're not working with the brands they want to be. What advice would you have for them? Would you recommend they do something like the mastermind? Would you recommend they do some other things? Like, talk to me about if you could go back and speak to Victor when we met, basically, like what advice would you have for Victor?
Yeah, no, for sure. It's on multiple levels, honestly, and all of it is just like investing yourself, but it all looks different. So for me, that was the business side of it. That was pitching. That was that kind of stuff that I was like naturally not very good or driven at, to learn that myself. So it's like what kind of made me decide to join the mastermind. I was like, okay, I need to get better at this, and I'm not really doing it by myself. So I want to invest in myself that way and pay for something that's going to accelerate my growth. And that was in that case the mastermind, and that worked really well for me. But I think for some other people, maybe they got more of an inclination towards the business side of it, but they just need more practice and repetition in their work. Because I think for me, both are super important. Like, it's the quality of what you're doing, it's how easy you are to work with, and if you're a good person, and it's obviously the business side. But they'll go hand in hand, like two varying percentages. And I'm probably gonna say like the business mind and actually running your business is more important than how good your photos are, but your work needs to be good.
100%. 100%.
It's like it's not like if you just do the business and your work's average, you're gonna make it. Some people might, but if they're both firing on all cylinders, then that's when you're gonna have the most success. I think so. For me, that was always the part that came most natural. It's like getting better at what I'm doing creatively, because I'm never really satisfied with what I'm doing. So there's always something I tend to pick apart and like repeat and do over. And that in a way is investing in yourself, just that practice and just getting out there and doing the thing, not just doing it once and keep sharing photos of the same place, but going out shooting every day, like shooting more, like trying new things, learning new things that way. But also, like, you know, obviously where it makes sense, it's like investing in yourself through other things, like the mastermind, or if that's what you need help with, or some people maybe need help with the creative and want to invest in like a photo course or stuff like that. So
I love that.
Investing in yourself. That's my answer.
Yeah, I love that. I love what you said there. You know, you said if your work is really good and you don't understand the business side, you're not going to make it. And if your business side is really good, but your work is terrible, you're probably not going to make it either. You know, the business side is probably the most important thing, but if you can get your work up, like, wow, that's when you're firing on all cylinders and stuff's really going to happen, which has been the case for you, which has been amazing. And I also love, you also added in another thing. You said the business side has got to be really good. Your work has got to be really good. And I also heard you say, like, how easy you are to work with is also important. I think that's really cool because I know some creatives who are really good at what they do, but they're nightmares to work with, right? And that is a huge strain on a relationship for a brand. And I often say, and I Victor, I'd love to know if you agree with this, your work and your understanding of like business knowledge is going to get you in the door working with a brand. But what's going to keep you in the door working with a brand is how easy you are to work with. Do you agree with that?
Yes. 100%. And I would say, again, that's like where I've seen some success from, is that I would just try to be a good person through all of it, and working with people, like, you know, people catch on to that. Like, you can be an asshole or you can be very nice. And obviously people like working with people they know are very nice, and if all the other stuff's there too, then obviously they're going to hire someone that they know, that they like, and whose work is good.
Yeah.
So it's honestly the main thing for me is like be a good person, because I know a bunch of people that are really great at what they do, that know a ton about business, but that are just not very nice to work with, and they're losing jobs because of that.
100%. Yeah, you might get honestly in the door, but you're not going to stay, right? You'll get kicked out. 100%. Man, that's a phenomenal way to end the episode, Victor. That was a great piece of value there. Last two questions. We ask everybody these questions on the show. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you online?
Instagram's probably the easiest. Yeah, it's just @VictorArden, my name.
Awesome. And then the last question, this is the signature question of the show. Why was committing to try and break the creative struggle in your own life worth it? Why was going from the physio guy, making the scary jump to a totally different profession, like, why is that worth it to you? And why do you think somebody else should look at that in their own life and make the same decision?
Yeah, I think at least if you have the possibility and like the space to do it, and like uh the capacity to do it, like following your passion, obviously everyone should be encouraged to at least try following your passion. And for some people it might just be a hobby, or some people it might turn into more. And like if there's any inkling of that it might work, why not at least try and go after it? Like otherwise you won't regret trying. Maybe you fail, maybe you succeed, but in 10 years you'll regret not trying versus actually trying. So
Yeah, beautiful, man. What a good way to wrap up the episode. You'll never regret trying. Victor, thanks so much for being on the show, man. This has been an awesome episode. Thanks so much for giving a ton of value about what's going on inside of your business, how you've grown your business, how other people can emulate you and do the same thing. And again, what a full circle moment as someone who said you came into the Creativ Rise Mastermind. One of the biggest things you got was just the mindset perspective that it's actually possible. And now you get to be that for somebody else through the show. So what a cool thing, man. Thanks for being on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome, man. Thank you. Well, what an amazing, amazing episode with Victor. That was so fun to have that conversation. He dropped so many bars of gold that I hope are catalysts for you in growing your own business. I know Victor mentioned that Creativ Rise has been a catalyst for him. Specifically, it was the mastermind that he went through, the 6-week signature mastermind that we have. That was a catalyst for him. I hope today, his story, the conversation we got to have, some of the tools, tricks, and tips that he dropped on the podcast is a catalyst for you as you move into the world of continuing to grow your own business. Again, that is why Creativ Rise exists. It's why we have this podcast, why we do it on a weekly basis. Every single Wednesday or Thursday, these episodes drop. We want to be a catalyst for you in making sure that you have every piece of information, every tool, every trick that you need, all the confidence we can help give you that you can borrow through the podcast for you to be able to go out and grow your business and succeed while doing what you love, just like Victor said, following your passion. So, so many things that he said I just loved. Like I loved what he said. I love what he said though about transparency and community and how important and integral those were for him to actually grow his business. He said he's surrounded by amazing people. He first met a ton of creatives in the Creativ Rise Mastermind that helped surround him, keep him accountable on things. I got to work with him closely, which is so fun. And he's got an incredible community where he lives. And guys, if you do not have something like that, I just want to reiterate what Victor said. That point is so important for you to not be isolated. If you are isolated, you are left in the dark, wandering around, hoping you're doing things well. And the odds of you doing them well are probably slim because none of us do things very well until we understand how other people are doing it. And that helps shape our strategy towards things. So the transparency that Victor talked about in the podcast, that he's able to get from other people, that he got from me in the mastermind, that he's got from his friends back home, that has been so important for him. It's been so important for me in my own career. And I know that it's important for you in your own career as well. So if you're going, well, Joe, I don't know where to get transparency like that, I would love to invite you to consider jumping on into the next round, the 10th round of the Creativ Rise 6-week mastermind. Victor was in round 1. We are just about to launch the 10th round at the end of August. The waitlist gets early access as they always do. All you got to do to go to get on the waitlist is go to creativrise.com and you'll see all the buttons there where you can check out all the information about the mastermind, what it's going to give you, some of the opportunities it's going to help slide in front of you, all the tools, tips, strategies, mindsets that's going to help give you shifts on, which is really important. And most importantly, it's going to give you a community of people. We only take 35 businesses per round, but 35 incredible businesses and all the accountability that's going to come with that, which is really cool. So the Creativ Rise Mastermind is our stab at trying to create a place, the best place on earth for creatives to learn how to get paid to do what they love and actually create a career where they can succeed at following their passion. And so just like Victor jumped in that in round 1, the opportunity is going to be there for 35 businesses at the end of August. So the wait list gets early access on August 23rd. If you're not on the wait list, I hate to say it, but you might not get the chance to claim a spot. Typically, we get 3 or 4 times more applications than we have spots. And so getting on the wait list means you get the application first. So if you are interested in that at all, make sure you head on over to creativrise.com, check it on out. And from there, you'll be set to get early access to the application. But other than that, guys, make sure you follow the show on whatever podcast streaming platform you're listening to. We try and give as much value as humanly possible every single week. I'm so glad we had Victor on because he just dropped some bars on what it means to grow your business and just some of the perspectives he has on it. I really enjoyed that episode. I hope you did as well. If you did, make sure you hit Victor up on online, give him a thanks for being on the show. And even better, share the podcast on your story. Tag Victor, tag me at Joey Spears, tag at Creativ Rise, and share it with a friend who might need to hear Victor's story and be inspired by it as well, so that they can, as well as you, receive this episode as a catalyst to help you grow your business in the future. So we'll see you guys next week. Thanks so much for being on. Huge thanks again to Victor, and yeah, see you next week.